In this video, I'm going to talk about phase changes. So in the last video, we talked about solids, liquids, and gases on their own, right? Like what are the particles doing? Here you can see a quick review of that, a different simulation than I had last time. On the left, we've got a hot liquid. You can see the particles are bouncing all over. They can move anywhere they want, but they're still quite close together to each other. Particles are always touching some other particles. Then in a solid, particles are still moving, but it's real slow. They're just sitting there vibrating in place. They can't move out of their spot. And what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to mix these two. I'm going to pour a hot liquid onto a cold solid. This is kind of like pouring hot water onto ice. And you know when that happens that that's going to cause the ice to melt. But what exactly is going to happen to the particles? Like how does that actually happen? Okay. We're also going to talk in this video about what temperature means, what it means to transfer heat. Okay, so a basic concept is that when heat is applied to any system, what that actually does is it makes the particles go faster. Okay, so that's the first little fact we want to get a handle on. Definition. Okay, temperature. You know that the higher the temperature, the hotter it feels, but what does that actually mean on a molecular level? Temperature is the average kinetic energy of particles in a sample. Well, kinetic energy, that means movement. Okay, so higher temp equals faster particles. It's as simple as that. The opposite is also true. If you have colder temperature, that's slower moving particles. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit the withdraw the barrier button. And what you see happening is all of a sudden the average kinetic energy of all these atoms just shot right up. Right, the fast atoms hit the slower ones, and that made the slower ones start to move faster. And now you can see these larger atoms on the right. It's not a cold solid anymore. They can move around the container now. Just like we predicted, the hot liquid melted the solid and turned that into its own liquid. Well, really on a molecular level, all that's happening is that the fast-moving liquid particles, when they hit those slow solid particles, they cause these slow particles to start moving faster. That's what heating up is. Okay. So, phase change. You need to learn some vocabulary words. We're going to learn about 7 different phase changes. You're going to want to make a triangle, solid on top, liquid bottom left, gas here. And the one I just showed you is from solid to liquid. That's called melting. And these are kind of common sense words mostly, but not always. If you go from liquid back to solid, that's freezing. Liquid to gas. This one actually has 2 words, and that's where I'm coming up with 7 different phase changes. You can do it real fast, that's boiling, or you can do it real slow, and that's evaporation. Boiling happens throughout the liquid, whereas evaporation only happens right at the surface, like when the sun is shining on the liquid. Here's a word that you might not know. If you go from gas back to liquid, that's called condensation. Easiest way to see this in Minnesota is just to wait for winter and breathe on a cold window in your car or in your house, and you're going to see your breath fog up that window. That's the water vapor in your breath turning to liquid water vapor on the glass. And then here are 2 more that you probably don't know. From solid to gas, that's called sublimation. And then from gas back to solid, that's called deposition. You need to memorize all these vocab words. They are going to show up later. And then the last thing we'll add to our notes here, definition. A phase change happens when the movement energy, the kinetic energy of the particles, is enough to break the bonds between the particles, or vice versa, but so kinetic energy gets high enough to break bonds between particles. I'll show that to you one more time. These particles on the right are bonded together. They're stuck in place. They're bonded really strongly together. The particles on the left are going to smash into them and give them enough energy to break free. Now that they have that extra energy, now the particles on the right can move around. They've broken the bonds that held them in place so that now they can move freely, and that was the phase change of melting. This is basically it. It's kind of common sense stuff in this unit. I'm just asking you to memorize a few vocab words and use those vocabulary words and the behavior of particles to explain what's happening when common physical changes happen.